My sister slept with my husband and said, "Don't interfere in our business." Now they expect me to care for their son. 3 years later, I gave them back those exact words. I, Emma, still remember that day vividly, when pale sunlight streamed through the window of my small apartment in suburban Minneapolis, where I stood frozen in the living room, hands trembling as I held the phone that had just recorded a conversation between my husband, Caleb, and my sister, Astrid. I was once a whole woman, a wife who loved her husband, a sister who always protected her sibling, a devoted daughter to my family, until the moment I discovered Astrid's affair with Caleb, the man I vowed to spend forever with. When I confronted her, my heart shattered, hoping for a shred of remorse. Astrid looked me in the eyes, her gaze cold as stone, and said, "What's between me and Caleb is none of your business. Don't interfere." Her words stabbed through my chest like a knife. I stood stunned, breath caught in my throat, feeling the floor beneath me collapse. Astrid, my sister, the one I held when she cried over heartbreaks, the one I worked overtime to buy birthday gifts for, now stood there, unrepentant, declaring her love with my husband was something I had no right to touch. I turned to Caleb, who had just entered the room, his face pale but silent, his eyes avoiding mine as if I were a stranger. "Is this true?" I asked, voice trembling, tears welling but held back by gritted teeth. He only nodded, mumbling, "I'm sorry, Emma, but I really love her." My heart shattered, not from losing Caleb, but from realizing I'd been betrayed by the two people I loved most, one by my husband, one by my blood. "You want this?" I said to Astrid, my voice cold, but my heart aching like it was being torn apart. "You want to take everything from your sister?" She didn't answer, just smirked, her eyes flickering between arrogance and unease, as if she knew she was wrong but lacked the courage to admit it. I didn't scream, didn't lash out. I just turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving them standing there, the sound of the door closing behind me like it sealed off the life I'd lived for them. Outside, a cold wind swept through the street, carrying a light drizzle that soaked my hair but couldn't extinguish the fire of pain in my heart. "They think I'll beg," I whispered, clutching my car keys, tears streaming but quickly wiped away. "But I won't let them see me fall." A painful question gnawed at me. How could someone betray their own sister like this? And what happens when the wheel turns? The dim glow of a small Minneapolis coffee shop lit my face as I, Emma, sat huddled in a corner, hands cradling a cold cup of coffee, eyes staring at the light rain falling against the window. Weeks had passed since I discovered Astrid slept with Caleb, since she looked at me with cold eyes and said, "What's between me and Caleb is none of your business. Don't interfere." Those words still echoed in my head, sharp as a blade, not just for exposing my sister's and husband's betrayal, but for resurfacing old scars piled up over years in this family. "What did I do to deserve this?" I whispered, my voice lost in the soft jazz of the shop, tears rolling down my cheeks, not from weakness, but from realizing I'd spent my life trying to please people who never saw me as vulnerable enough to love, important enough to cherish. I was always the too strong daughter in my parents' eyes, a title that sounded like praise, but was really a burden on my shoulders since childhood. As the eldest, I grew up with the unspoken expectation to carry the load, to sacrifice, to be a role model so Astrid, my sister, 5 years younger, could live carefree. At 8, I taught myself to cook because mom was busy soothing Astrid when she cried for toys. At 15, I worked at a bakery to buy school supplies, while Astrid got a new dress just because she liked pink. I wasn't jealous. I thought being a big sister meant giving way, protecting her. But every time I brought home academic awards, mom just nodded, saying, "Good, Emma, but don't get cocky," then hugged Astrid for her D because she tried. "Your sister needs encouragement," she said, her eyes gliding past me as if my efforts were obvious, unworthy of notice. I swallowed the bitterness, tucking certificates into a drawer, learning not to expect recognition, but each time, a new scar formed, small but deep, lingering forever. The favoritism didn't stop as we grew, it grew crueler, like a blade cutting deeper into my heart. I worked hard, studied psychology, opened a small counseling practice, and took pride in helping women heal from emotional wounds. But every time I shared my successes, my parents nodded absently, then asked, "How's Astrid? Is your sister okay?" Astrid, in their eyes, was forever the fragile one, needing protection, even as she quit jobs, spent money on lavish trips, and lived off their indulgence. I remember when Astrid was fired from a boutique for stealing, and Mom cried, saying, "Your sister's just lost. She needs help." I stood there, after a long workday, hands holding client files, wondering, what about me? Who helps me when I'm tired? But I said nothing. I forced a smile, kept working, thinking one day they'd see me, understand my sacrifices. When I married Caleb, I thought I'd finally found a real family, a place where I was loved for me, not for being strong or sacrificial. Caleb, with his warm smile and gentle eyes, made me believe I deserved happiness. But looking back, I see the signs I ignored. Astrid was always around Caleb when she visited, laughing with him too intimately, her eyes sparkling as if they shared a secret I didn't know. I told myself it was just sibling affection, innocent, harmless. But when my parents visited, they pulled Astrid and Caleb into private conversations, leaving me in the living room, holding a teacup, feeling like an outsider in my own home. They liked Astrid more, I'd think, but brushed it off, unwilling to believe my family could be so biased. Why didn't I see? I whispered in the coffee shop, tears falling into my cup, not for Caleb or Astrid, but for being blind to believe love and blood could overcome selfishness. Astrid and Caleb's betrayal pushed everything to a breaking point, and my parents' response was the final blow. When I filed for divorce, heart shattered, I called Mom, hoping for comfort. But she just sighed over the phone, her voice cold. "Emma, you're too tough. If you were softer, Caleb wouldn't have left." My father said, "Astrid's fragile. She needs Caleb more than you do. You should understand your sister." Those words felt like a slap. I sat in my counseling office, the desk lamp lighting my face, tears streaming as I realized they didn't just abandon me. They blamed me for being betrayed, as if I was wrong for not giving my husband to my sister. Astrid and Caleb married just 8 months after the divorce, under the glowing lights of a small church, and I wasn't invited, not a word, not an apology. I cut all contact with them, deleted their numbers, blocked social media, and locked my heart against them. For 3 years, not a single apology, not a single message, not from Astrid, Caleb, or my parents. I sat in the coffee shop that night, watching the rain, my heart heavy but clearer than ever. "They think I'll always be the one to carry the load," I whispered, wiping tears, clutching my coffee cup. "They think I'll forgive, forget. But I'm not that person anymore." A cold resolve flared in me, not for revenge, but to protect myself. "I'll live for me," I thought, watching streetlights blur through the rain. "And if the wheel turns, I'll show them how strong I am, not by hurting them, but by living better than they ever dreamed." The pale blue glow of my phone flickered in the darkness of my small Minneapolis apartment, jolting me from fitful sleep as I, Emma, reached for it, eyes stinging from being woken at 2 a.m. 3 years had passed since I discovered Astrid slept with Caleb, since she looked at me with cold eyes and said, "What's between me and Caleb is none of your business. Don't interfere." I'd cut all ties with them, locked my heart against those who betrayed me, and built a new life, quiet, unassuming, but mine. The unfamiliar number on the screen made me pause, but when I answered, Caleb's voice, shaky, panicked, hit like a stone into a still lake. "Emma, I need your help. Astrid's been in a car accident. She's critical. No one's here for the boy." I sat up, heart pounding, not from worry, but from the smoldering anger of 3 years ago flaring hotter than ever. "They dare call me after everything?" I whispered, gripping the phone, moonlight slipping through the curtains onto my face, cold but resolute. Caleb continued, his voice breaking as if holding back tears. "Ben's only 2, Emma. I have to be at the hospital with Astrid. Your parents can't help. I'm begging you, for old time's sake, take care of him for a few days." The phrase "old time's sake" felt like a slap. I remembered the apartment 3 years ago, where I stood frozen as Astrid declared her love with Caleb was none of my business, where Caleb nodded, admitting he loved my sister without meeting my eyes. Old times? I thought, tears streaming but lips pressed tight. They destroyed my life, and now they dare mention old times? I took a deep breath, my voice calm but icy, replying with the exact words Astrid used to push me out of their world. "This is none of my business." Caleb went silent, only his heavy breathing audible. Then he mumbled, "Emma, please. Just a few days." But I hung up, not letting him finish, feeling like I'd lifted a boulder off my chest. "They have no right to ask me," I whispered, lying back down, moonlight on my face, my heart relieved but still aching, not for Ben, but because I knew I had to protect myself, even if it meant being called heartless. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time, my mother, Ellen. I wasn't surprised, but her voice over the phone stunned me with its sharpness. "Emma, you're so cruel. Astrid's in the hospital, fighting for her life, and you won't help with Ben? You've held a grudge too long." I sat in my counseling office, sunlight streaming onto client files on my desk, hands trembling as I listened. Cruel? I thought, tears rising but swallowed, remembering the days I collapsed after the divorce, when I called Mom for comfort, only to hear, "You're too tough, Emma. Astrid needs Caleb more than you." They were silent when I suffered, offered no support, never asked if I was okay. But now they blame me for not saving the son of those who betrayed me. "You know what Astrid and Caleb did to me," I said, voice calm but firm, "and you chose their side. Don't ask me to heal the wounds this family caused." Mom went silent, then sighed, "You'll regret this if Astrid doesn't make it." I hung up, saying nothing, my heart not angry, not truly, but hurting from realizing they hadn't changed, still seeing me as the one who must sacrifice, even after I'd lost everything. My father called right after, Thomas's voice heavier than usual. "Emma, you're the older sister. You have a responsibility to Ben. Don't let this family break further." I stood, stepping onto my office balcony, looking at the bustling street under early sunlight, feeling my heart squeezed. Family break? I thought, gripping the railing. They broke it with Astrid and Caleb, not me. I replied, voice shaky but certain, "I didn't break this family, Dad. I'm just protecting myself." He said nothing more, just hung up, and I stood there, spring breeze lifting my hair, tears streaming but left unwiped. I let them fall, like cleansing the last expectations my family placed on me. Only my brother, John, stood by me. He called one evening as I sat in my apartment, the desk lamp lighting the book I was reading to escape my parents' calls. "Emma," he said, his voice warm and steady, "no one has the right to force you to fix a family that broke you. Astrid and Caleb chose their path and Mom and Dad enabled them. You owe them nothing." I listened, tears falling, not from pain, but because for the first time, I felt understood. John, who'd quietly supported me since childhood, was the only light in this family. "I know you love the kid," he continued, "but love doesn't mean you have to sacrifice more." I nodded, though he couldn't see, and whispered, "Thank you, John." His words were a lifeline, keeping me from drowning in the guilt my parents tried to impose. I sat in my apartment that night, moonlight glowing through the window, lighting an old photo of me and John as kids, when I still smiled freely, before Astrid and Caleb came and shattered everything. "They think I'll soften," I thought, brushing the photo. "They think I'll rush to the hospital, hold Ben, and forgive it all." But I wasn't that person anymore. I'd learned protecting my heart wasn't selfish. It was the only way I could keep living. "This is none of my business," I whispered again, not to convince myself, but to affirm I deserved freedom, deserved to live without being pulled back into that toxic spiral. The pale sunlight of a late spring afternoon in Minneapolis slipped through my counseling office window, lighting the wooden desk where I, Emma, sat quietly reading a client's email, trying to keep my mind from the emotional waves rising within. A month had passed since Caleb's midnight call, begging me to care for Ben, their 2-year-old son, because Astrid was hospitalized after a serious car accident. I'd replied with the same words Astrid used to shut me out. "This is none of my business." That phrase, though it helped me hold my boundaries, couldn't erase the image of an innocent boy I'd never met, nor stop the painful questions swirling in my heart. Am I doing the right thing? Or am I becoming the cold, heartless person I once despised? I sat there, sunlight on my face, gripping my pen, heart conflicted but clear on one thing. I couldn't let myself be dragged back into the toxic cycle Astrid, Caleb, and my parents created. The hardest decision came when my brother, John, called one late evening, his voice warm but serious. "Emma, I've taken Ben in." I froze, Sitting in my small apartment, the desk lamp lighting an old photo of me and John as kids, my heart racing as he explained. John had gone to the hospital, where Caleb was nearly breaking down, torn between Astrid and work, while my parents, who'd called me cruel, couldn't care for Ben, too busy with Astrid. John, with a generous but not soft heart, decided to take Ben in as his nephew, bringing the boy to his suburban home with his wife and 2 kids. The kid's innocent, John said over the phone, but I won't pressure you to do anything, Emma. You don't have to be an aunt or stand-in mom if you're not ready. I listened, tears streaming, not from pain, but from gratitude that John understood I needed to protect my heart, even if it meant staying on the sidelines of an innocent child's life. I sat quietly after the call, moonlight glowing through the window, lighting my face as I thought of Ben, a boy I'd never met, but who carried part of Astrid's blood, the sister who betrayed me so cruelly. I didn't hate him, not at all, but every time I imagined holding Ben, caring for him, I saw Astrid in that apartment 3 years ago, her cold eyes saying, "Don't interfere." I saw Caleb, nodding to admit he loved her, and my parents, blaming me for being too tough during the divorce. I can't, I whispered, hands covering my face, tears soaking my palms. I can't let them back into my life, even through Ben. But I couldn't fully turn away from the boy, not for Astrid or Caleb, but because I didn't want to become truly heartless. After sleepless nights, I decided to help financially, indirectly, sending regular payments through John for Ben's clothes, toys, and a decent home. But I won't meet him, I told John over the phone, voice firm. No contact, no talks. This is my line. John agreed, no judgment, saying only, "I respect you, Emma." That choice wasn't easy, and society didn't let it pass quietly. News of Astrid's hospitalization spread fast in our small community, and whispers began. An old colleague texted me, judgmental. "Emma, how can you abandon your nephew like that? Even if Astrid was wrong, Ben's still family." A high school friend met me at the grocery store, eyes pitying. "I get you're hurt, but is being this cold worth it?" I stood in the aisle under fluorescent lights, gripping my basket, heart aching but unmoved. "Cold?" I thought, meeting her gaze. "Cold's better than being stabbed in the back again." I didn't explain, not because I couldn't, but because I knew those who'd never been betrayed by blood would never understand. I walked away, left the store, spring breeze lifting my hair, and thought, I don't live to please them. I live to protect myself. My parents, as I expected, didn't stop criticizing. Mom called days later, her voice trembling. "Emma, you've disappointed me so much. Ben's your nephew, and you won't even look at him." I sat in my office, sunlight on client files, hands pausing mid-note. Heart not angry, not anymore, but tired of their repetitive blame. "Do you remember what Astrid did to me?" I asked, voice calm but sharp. "Do you remember siding with her, telling me to understand?" She went silent, only a sigh audible, then said, "But that's over, Emma. You can't hold a grudge forever." I hung up, saying nothing, feeling like I'd closed a final door. "Grudge?" I whispered, looking at the bustling street outside. "I don't hold a grudge. I just don't want to be hurt again." John was the only light in that darkness. He visited one afternoon, bringing a drawing Ben made. A scribbled house with a bright yellow sun. "The kid's okay," he said, sitting on my apartment sofa, sunlight on his face. "But I want you to know you're not wrong for choosing yourself." I looked at the drawing, hands trembling, feeling my heart ache and lighten at once. "Thank you," I whispered, tears falling, "for doing what I couldn't." John smiled, patting my shoulder. "You could, Emma. You just chose a different strength." I nodded, hugged him, knowing I'd done right, not because I was heartless, but because I'd learned love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for the unworthy. The gentle early autumn sunlight in Burlington, Vermont, slipped through my small apartment's window, lighting the wooden desk where I, Emma, sat writing notes for an upcoming counseling session, hands gently flipping my notebook, heart calm like a still lake. 4 years had passed since I discovered Astrid slept with Caleb, since she looked at me coldly and said, "What's between me and Caleb is none of your business. Don't interfere." I'd walked through dark days, the pain of betrayal by my sister and husband, my parents' criticism, and the hardest choice to refuse caring for Ben, their son, to protect my heart. Now, I stood here, not just a therapist, not just a woman who left Minneapolis to start over, but a free, self-respecting Emma, living a life needing no one's proof. I found myself, I whispered, smiling as sunlight hit my face. And for the first time, I live for me, not Astrid, not Caleb, not anyone's expectations. I left Minneapolis 6 months after John took Ben in, not to escape, but to sever the last ties to a toxic past. I chose Burlington, a small town with tree-lined streets, white-painted wooden houses, and no one who knew my old story. I rented this apartment, a cozy space with large windows overlooking Lake Champlain, where I sipped each morning, hear birds sing, and let my heart settle. I opened a therapy practice, specializing in women who'd been hurt, betrayed, overlooked, abandoned. I remember my first session when a woman sat across from me, tears falling as she spoke of her cheating husband, and I held her hand, saying, "You're not wrong for hurting. You deserve to heal." Those words weren't just for her, but for me, for the Emma of 4 years ago, who thought she'd never overcome the pain. Each day, helping a client find light, I feel my heart mend bit by bit, like a painting redrawn with softer colors. My life isn't loud, no parties, no spotlight, but peaceful enough that I have nothing to prove. I wake each morning, jog along the lake, feel cool breezes through my hair, and smile at small things. A fragrant coffee, a good book, a client's thank you. I hang self-taken photos on my walls, me by the lake, me smiling under fiery autumn trees, reminders that I'm enough, that I don't need Astrid, Caleb, or my parents to feel whole. Happiness, I thought, standing in my office, sunlight on my face, isn't making them regret. It's living so well, they're no longer in my mind. I don't hate my family, not anymore, but I don't need them to know I'm worthy of love. While I rebuilt, my family paid dearly for their choices. John told me Astrid's still in long-term care, her health improving slowly, but she's no longer the arrogant girl who stole Caleb from me. She's quiet, her eyes empty when John visits, as if realizing what she lost, not just me, but her own dignity. Caleb, who promised a perfect life with Astrid, now works 2 jobs, driving trucks by day, washing dishes at night to cover hospital bills and raise Ben. John said he's gone, face hollowed, but hasn't called me to apologize or beg again. They're living their consequences, John said over the phone, voice low with sadness. But I'm not sure they've learned anything. I listened, brushing the silver bracelet John gave me when I moved to Burlington, thinking, they don't need to learn. I don't live waiting for their change. My parents, who called me too tough, heartless, grew silent. John said Mom, Ellen, no longer speaks of Astrid as the fragile girl needing protection. She sighs when asked about me, saying, Emma, she's doing well, somewhere far. Dad, Thomas, who told me to be responsible for family, now sits alone in their old house, staring at a childhood family photo, saying nothing. They don't call anymore, not since I hung up when Mom tried convincing me to care for Ben. I don't laugh at the reversal. I just see a harsh lesson. When you undervalue someone who loves you, you lose more than a daughter. They thought I'd always carry the load. I thought, standing in my office, sunlight on my face. But I'm the only one living true to myself. I stepped out of my office that night, Burlington's moonlight glowing, a cool breeze easing my heart like never before. My therapy practice was just featured in a local magazine, praised for helping women reclaim strength after trauma, and I was invited to share my story at a workshop. Not to boast, but to talk about healing, about choosing yourself when family turns away. I was betrayed, I thought, holding tea, watching moonlight reflect on Lake Champlain, but I didn't let it define me. Astrid and Caleb struggle. My parents live in regret, but I stand here, free, self-respecting, and stronger than ever. Justice, I smiled, isn't watching them fall, it's seeing myself stand, with a heart no longer afraid to love or trust. If you've been betrayed by your own flesh and blood, would you forgive, or keep distance to protect your heart? Do you think Emma was wrong to refuse help? Or was it the first time she truly chose herself? If you believe living true to your heart matters more than pleasing others, like, comment, and subscribe to follow more stories of family justice and emotional rebirth like this.